Imagine you're at a family barbecue
Oh, yeah.
and, you're introduced to this charming young man,
Hmm.
polite, engaging, maybe even a little shy.
Right.
You would never guess that this seemingly ordinary person
Uh-huh.
is, harboring these dark secrets, a predilection for violence
Right.
that will eventually lead him down a path of unimaginable horror.
Yeah.
That's the chilling reality behind the story of Harvey Glatman,
Hmm.
a serial killer who terrorized Los Angeles in the late 1950s.
Yeah.
And today we're taking a deep dive into his life and crimes,
Absolutely.
exploring the, complexities of his psyche and the societal context that both shaped and failed to stop him.
Yeah. You know what's particularly intriguing about Glatman's case?
Yeah.
Is that it offers a glimpse into the early warning signs of a predator.
Right.
Signs that sadly went largely unnoticed or were tragically misinterpreted at the time.
Right. The source material you provided paints a very disturbing picture of Glatman's childhood.
Oh, yeah.
We're not just talking about typical childhood mischief here.
No.
Some of his behaviors, even at a very young age, were deeply unsettling.
Absolutely. And I think it's crucial to examine these behaviors.
Yeah.
Not just as isolated incidents, but as potential indicators of something far more sinister brewing beneath the surface.
Right.
For instance, the source material describes Glatman engaging in autoerotic asphyxiation at the age of 4.
That's incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom a child that young even comprehending such a thing.
Exactly. And it raises a whole host of questions.
Right.
Was this a sign of early childhood trauma?
Yeah.
Was it an indicator of a deeper psychological disturbance?
Right.
We have to remember that in the 1940s, when Glatman was a child, the understanding of child psychology and the recognition of such behaviors as potential red flags were far less developed than they are today.
So how did his parents and the medical professionals around him respond to these early warning signs?
Unfortunately, the source material suggests a pattern of dismissal and misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Glatman's parents, perhaps out of shame or denial, seemed to minimize his actions, attributing them to childish curiosity or hoping he would simply grow out of it.
It's heartbreaking to think that perhaps with a different approach, a deeper understanding of the potential implications of his behavior,
Yeah.
things might have turned out differently.
It certainly raises questions about the missed opportunities for early intervention.
Yeah.
The source material mentions that Glatman was taken to a doctor who prescribed pills and advised keeping him occupied, but there's no indication of any in-depth psychological evaluation.
Wow.
Or any attempt to address the potential underlying causes of his disturbing behavior.
It's easy to judge the actions of his parents and doctors through a modern lens.
Sure.
But as you said, we have to consider the social context.
Right.
This was a time when mental health issues were often stigmatized and poorly understood.
Precisely. Mental health wasn't something that was openly discussed or readily addressed. It was often seen as a weakness or something to be hidden away.
So knowing what we know now, it seems like these early years were a critical period.
Yeah.
A time when intervention might have made a difference. But sadly, that opportunity was missed, and Glatman's behavior continued to escalate.
Yes. And as Glatman entered his adolescence, his disturbing tendencies took on a more sinister form. He began engaging in what he called creeping, breaking into apartments and stealing items.
And it wasn't long before these petty crimes morphed into something far more dangerous.
That's right. Glatman's criminal activity escalated to breaking into the homes of single women,
Wow.
tying them up and assaulting them.
And sadly, instead of recognizing the severity of these actions and seeking professional help, his parents continued to enable his behavior.
The source material even mentions them pushing for a lobotomy as a solution.
Really?
A procedure that was thankfully never performed, but it speaks volumes about their desperation and their misguided belief that Glatman's issues could be surgically eradicated rather than addressed through therapy and psychological intervention.
It's almost as if they were trying to fix a broken appliance instead of understanding the complexities of their son's troubled mind.
Right.
And this cycle of arrest, minimal punishment, and release continued paving the way for his crimes to become even more disturbing.
Adding to the complexity of the case is the inconsistency in the various psychiatric evaluations Glatman underwent.
Right.
One doctor diagnosed him with schizophrenia. Another found no evidence of psychosis.
Okay.
And yet another labeled him a psychopathic personality, schizophrenic type.
Wow.
A term used at the time to describe individuals exhibiting both psychotic symptoms and traits associated with psychopathy. a personality disorder characterized by a lack of empathy and remorse.
So even the experts couldn't agree on a definitive diagnosis, let alone an effective treatment plan.
It highlights the limitations of psychiatric knowledge and practice at the time.
Right.
It also raises questions about how much progress we've made in understanding and treating such complex psychological conditions.
And as Glatman grew older, these unresolved issues combined with his escalating criminal behavior set the stage for a dark and tragic turn of events.
Yes, and that brings us to his move to Los Angeles.
Okay.
A city that would become both his hunting ground and the backdrop for his eventual downfall. Los Angeles in the 1950s, the land of Hollywood glamour, sunshine, and endless possibilities.
Right.
It was a magnet for dreamers and those seeking fame and fortune.
Right.
But for Glatman, it became a hunting ground, a place where he could exploit the vulnerabilities of those longing for their moment in the spotlight.
You're right. The allure of Hollywood, especially the modeling and pinup scene, provided Glatman with a perfect cover for his sinister intentions.
Yeah.
He could easily pose as a photographer, offering aspiring models the chance to build their portfolios, all the while luring them into his web of deceit.
And it was a time when such offers were commonplace.
Yeah.
Modeling was a booming industry,
Right.
and many young women were eager to break into the business. Glatman, with his charm and seemingly legitimate interest in photography, was able to gain their trust, making them all the more vulnerable to his manipulations.
It's chilling to think how he was able to blend in, using the very tools and aspirations of the industry to mask his predatory nature.
Right.
The source material details how he used fake names, contacted models through agencies and ads, and presented himself as a professional photographer.
Yeah.
He even created a makeshift studio in his apartment to further legitimize his facade.
It was a carefully crafted persona,
Right.
designed to disarm his victims and make them feel comfortable in his presence.
Right.
He understood the power dynamics at play and used them to his advantage.
It's like something out of a nightmare, this seemingly ordinary man hiding in plain sight, preying on the hopes and dreams of these young women.
Yeah.
And tragically, his plan worked.
Yeah.
He managed to lure numerous women into his trap,
Mm-hmm.
and the consequences were devastating.
His first known victim was Judy Dull, a young woman who, like so many others, was drawn to the allure of modeling Glatman using the alias Johnny Glynn.
Wow.
Contacted her through a modeling agency,
Okay.
offering her a paid photo shoot.
It's heartbreaking to think of her excitement. The anticipation of a potential career in modeling, only to have it all brutally extinguished.
The source material describes how Glatman drove Judy to a remote area in the desert, supposedly for the photo shoot.
Yeah.
But instead of capturing her beauty on film, he ended her life strangling her with a rope and leaving her body in a shallow grave.
Wow.
He even kept one of her shoes as a trophy, a chilling reminder of his horrific act.
It's a level of depravity that's difficult to comprehend.
Yeah.
To take a life so callously and then to keep a memento of the crime. It speaks to a profound lack of empathy and remorse.
And tragically, Judy's murder was just the beginning.
Right.
Glatman's appetite for violence only grew with each subsequent victim.
The source material details his next murder, that of Shirley Bridgeford, a young woman he met through a lonely hearts club. What's particularly disturbing about this case is that Shirley's family actually met Glatman
Right.
before he abducted and murdered her.
Yes. The source material mentions that Shirley's family had dinner with Glatman and even saw him drive off with their daughter, unaware of the danger she was in.
Wow, it's a haunting image. This seemingly ordinary encounter masking a sinister reality.
Right.
And it highlights the insidious nature of Glatman's crimes.
Yeah.
He was able to gain the trust of not only his victims, but also those closest to them, making his deception all the more chilling.
And his methods remained eerily consistent.
Right.
He would lure his victims to secluded locations, often using the pretense of photography, and then overpower them, tie them up, and ultimately strangle them with a rope. He would then pose and photograph their bodies,
Wow.
capturing their lifeless forms in a macabre display of power and control.
It's a disturbing pattern that reveals a deeply troubled psyche, a mind obsessed with domination and the infliction of pain.
And it's important to know that Glatman didn't simply kill his victims. Yeah.
He seemed to relish the process, the act of controlling their final moments.
Right.
He took trophies from each of them, pieces of their clothing or jewelry, tangible reminders of his horrific acts.
It's like he was creating a collection of sorts, a gruesome testament to his crimes.
And all the while, the police were struggling to connect the dots.
Right.
The disappearances of these young women were often treated as isolated incidents, runaways, or perhaps even voluntary disappearances.
Yeah.
The idea of a serial killer operating in their midst was almost inconceivable at the time.
It's a tragic example of how societal norms and law enforcement practices of the era often fail to recognize the patterns that in hindsight seem so obvious.
Right.
And it allowed Glatman to continue his reign of terror, claiming more victims, each one a life tragically cut short, a family left devastated by an unspeakable loss.
His third victim, Ruth Marcato, was a former servicewoman and model who initially rejected Glatman's advances.
Oh, wow.
But he was persistent, and eventually he found a way to get clever to her, attacking her in her own home. The source material describes a particularly brutal attack, with Ruth being subjected to hours of assault and torture before Glatman ultimately strangled her and disposed of her body in the desert.
Right.
Like a chilling reminder of the escalating nature of his crimes, the increasing violence and depravity with each new victim.
Yeah.
It's as if he was feeding a dark hunger within himself, a hunger that could only be satiated by inflicting pain and exerting ultimate control.
Mm-hmm.
And it's with his final intended victim that we see a shift in the narrative, a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness.
Yes, Lorraine Vigil, a young woman who through a combination of courage, quick thinking, and a bit of luck managed to escape Glatman's clutches
Right.
and set in motion the chain of events that would lead to his capture.
It's almost hard to believe that someone like Glatman, who had evaded capture for so long, could be brought down by something as simple as a chance encounter with a police car.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's those seemingly insignificant moments that can change the course of history. In this case, it was Lorraine Vigil's desperate dash for freedom, her unwavering determination to survive, that set the wheels of justice in motion.
The source material describes the scene vividly. Glatman driving Lorraine to a secluded area, her growing sense of unease, and then in the distance, the flashing lights of a police car. It must have been a moment of pure adrenaline and terror, a fight-or-flight response that kicked in just in time.
And what's remarkable about Lorraine's story is that she didn't just run, she fought back. She struggled against Glatman, kicking and scratching, doing whatever she could to break free from his grasp. It was that fierce resistance that allowed her to create enough distance to attract the attention of the police officer.
Her escape was a turning point, not just in her own life, but in the entire investigation. Her detailed description of Glatman, his car, and his methods provided the police with the crucial break they needed.
Up until that point, the police had been working with scattered pieces of information. Missing person reports that didn't quite connect, a sense that something sinister was afoot, but no concrete evidence to tie it all together. Lorraine's testimony changed everything.
It's fascinating how one person's courage can have such a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
Her actions not only saved her own life, but also brought an end to Glatman's reign of terror and provided closure for the families of his victims.
Absolutely. And from there, the investigation moved quickly. The police, armed with Lorraine's information, were able to identify Glatman and set up a surveillance operation outside his apartment.
It must have been a tense weight knowing they were dealing with a dangerous predator, but also knowing that they were finally closing in on him.
The source material describes the moment of Glatman's arrest, the sense of relief and satisfaction as he was apprehended without incident. And then came the search of his apartment, a search that would reveal the true extent of his depravity.
The metal toolbox he kept, filled with photographs of his victims. It's a chilling image, a tangible manifestation of his twisted psyche.
It was a gruesome discovery, a collection of macabre trophies that not only confirmed Glatman's guilt, but also provided a window into his disturbed mind. The photos taken before, during, and after the murders revealed a calculated cruelty, a fascination with death, and the control he held over his victims' final moments.
And as if the photographs weren't disturbing enough, the source material mentions that Glatman also kept personal items from each of his victims. Jewelry, pieces of clothing, even locks of hair. It's as if he was trying to preserve his connection to them, to hold on to the power he had exerted over them in life and death.
It's a level of psychological complexity that is both fascinating and deeply unsettling. What drove him to commit these acts? What satisfaction did he derive from taking these trophies? These are questions that continue to intrigue and perplex criminologists and psychologists to this day.
And once in custody, Glatman confessed to his crimes in chilling detail.
Wow.
Did he show any remorse for his actions?
The source material suggests that he offered a variety of explanations for his behavior, blaming his upbringing, his loneliness, even his victims themselves. But there was a distinct lack of genuine remorse, a detachment from the gravity of his crimes that is both baffling and disturbing.
It's almost as if he was unable to fully grasp the magnitude of the suffering he had caused, the lives he had destroyed.
And in a way, that lack of empathy is a hallmark of this psychopathic personality. It's not that they're incapable of understanding the concept of right and wrong, it's that they lack the emotional capacity to truly connect with the pain and suffering of others.
Glatman's trial in 1958 was a media sensation, capturing the public's attention with its gruesome details and offering a glimpse into the mind of a seemingly ordinary man who harbored such darkness within.
And it was a pivotal moment in the history of criminal justice, a case that helped to shape public perceptions of serial killers and led to advancements in forensic science and criminal profiling.
His defense team tried to argue that he was insane, but the prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting the premeditation and calculated nature of his crimes. And in the end, the jury found him guilty on all counts.
The judge in his sentencing remarks called Glatman a menace to society and sentenced him to death. His execution in 1959 marked the end of his reign of terror, but it didn't erase the scars he left behind.
Glatman's story is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. His case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the fragile line that separates sanity from madness. But it also highlights the importance of vigilance, the need to recognize and address early warning signs, and the crucial role of law enforcement and the justice system in protecting the innocent. What are your final thoughts?
It's a story that stays with you long after you've heard it, a tale of tragedy, terror, and ultimately a testament to the power of hope in the enduring pursuit of justice. We encourage you to share your thoughts and insights on this case, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating and sometimes unsettling world around us.